South Korea has hosted the country's first ever summit with African nations today, bringing together leaders and delegations from 48 countries. Under the tagline, "The Future We Make Together," Korea and participating nations discussed ways to achieve shared growth, sustainability, and solidarity through close cooperation. Hopes are running high that the historic summit will further boost ties between the two regions, from trade and investment to technology collaboration and joint response to global challenges. On this episode of Within the Frame, we look into the key watch points of the summit and future prospects of Korea-Africa relations. For that, we have Hwang Kyu-Deug, professor of African Studies at Hankuk University of Foreign Studies, joining us virtually. It's so great to have you with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Also with us tonight is Seoni, Associate Research Fellow of Africa and Middle East team at the Korea Institute for International Economic Policy. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Happy to be back. Thank you.
All right, let's begin with you, Professor Hwang. The highly anticipated South Korea-Africa summit has just wrapped up today. Could you first highlight the importance and significance of the gathering?
Yeah, the South Korea-Africa Summit is a significant event for several reasons, highlighting the growing importance of South Korea's engagement with Africa. First, the summit is a landmark event underscoring the growing importance of Africa in global geopolitics and economics. In fact, this Korea-Africa Summit is the largest multilateral summit since the inauguration of Yoon Suk-yeol administration and has great meaning and importance in that it is the first multilateral summit co-hosted by Korea and Africa. The Yoon Suk-yeol government has been promoting strategic cooperation with Africa since its inception under the vision of global pivotal state. In this sense, we can confirm the importance of this summit in that our country is expanding strategic cooperation with the global south. This is a sign of our Indo-Pacific cooperation based on the principles of inclusion, trust, and mutual benefit. The importance of this summit is particularly highlighted in that it is consistent with the purpose of the strategy and is in line with our responsible diplomacy policy of contributing to reducing global disparities as a responsible member of the international community. Moreover, Africa's strategic importance is growing more than ever, and as can be seen from the fact that major countries such as United States, Japan, China, India, and Russia are already operating summit meetings with Africa. Cooperation with Africa, in that sense, is not just an option for Korea, which aims to become a global pivotal state, as I just mentioned, but rather it is recognized as essential element.
Well, it's Korea's first ever summit with African nations, and as you pointed out, it's also the largest multilateral summit to be hosted by the Yoon administration, and expectations are certainly high that the summit will catalyze mutual growth and prosperity, poised to redefine the economic landscape of both regions and beyond. Dr. Han, what were the key agenda items of the summit?
Yes, the summit is held with the theme, "The Future We Make Together, Shared Growth, Sustainability, and Solidarity." And today in the opening speech at the summit, President Yoon explained each value in the slogan. And the slogan presents the principles for fostering a better structured and stronger partnership between Korea and Africa, in line with the government vision to become a global pivotal state. And the summit's key agenda items are basically threefold. So first, strengthening economic cooperation for shared growth. And second, promoting industrial infrastructure and digital transformation. And third, establishing a collaborative framework to tackle global challenges such as ensuring food security and health security.
Various economic agreements with the goal of co-prosperity, digital transformation, as well as joint response to global challenges like climate change and supply chain risks were also some of the key topics on the table. Professor Hwang, economic cooperation for co-prosperity topped the agenda during the summit. While Africa ranks at the bottom of Korea's trade partners, how has the continent emerged as a region of untapped market and growth potential for South Korea?
Yeah, South Korea, Africa's emergence as a region of untapped market and growth potential for our country is driven by several factors that make the continent increasingly attractive for economic cooperation. Recently, Africa has emerged as a growth engine for the world economy. It is a region that is growing rapidly. Therefore, it is suggested that Korea, which is at risk of falling into the swamp of low growth, can be of great help if it builds robust and firm relationship with Africa. Accordingly, expectations are actually rising. According to the Korea Development Institute, KDI, in the worst case scenario, Korea's potential growth rate in the 2030s will slow to 0%, making Africa a new market for Korea. These observations are being made that it could become a growth engine for South Korea. In fact, according to the International Monetary Fund, 11 of the top 20 countries in world economic growth this year are expected to be in Africa. Niger, which is expected to boost its hydrocarbon export, is ranked first with a growth rate of 11.2%. Senegal is shown high economic growth rate of 8.2%, and Libya is 7.9%. Not just this year, Africa has infinite growth potential. As of 2024, Africa's population reached 1.4 billion people, and the median age is 19 years old. Africa is rich in a much younger population, as the median age of India, a country with a large population and considered a growth engine for the global economy, is 28 years. It is predicted that Africa will have the largest working force in the world, surpassing India and China, with a working age population reaching 1 billion within 10 years. The conditions for us to advance into Africa are well established. In fact, if you look at the weekly rankings of Netflix TV series in Kenya, as of mid-February, True Beauty ranked second and Love to Hate You ranked fourth. Fifth place was Physical 100. Ninth place was Mr. Queen. And there were 4 Korean contents in the top 10.
Well, Africa, boasting the world's youngest population and the world's fastest economic growth, as you listed, is considered the world's last growth engine, not to mention the wealth of natural resources as well, which is why many say that cooperation with Africa is no longer an option, but an imperative. Dr. Han, Africa is home to 30% of the world's critical minerals. Exactly how would deepening ties with the continent help South Korea to counter supply chain risks?
Yes, basically, the economic structure of Korean and African countries are complementary. So the two sides can establish mutually beneficial partnership based on the comparative strength of each other. And the key sectors in this regards are energy and critical mineral sectors. So more cooperation can be expected in these sectors. And since 2016, the green transition has been accelerated, and demands for the critical minerals, those materials essential for manufacturing electric vehicles and green products, they are on the rise. Demands are on the rise, but the supplies of these critical minerals are concentrated only a few countries, and the substitutions are not yet limited. So it became important to secure stable supply chains of these critical minerals. And for this reason, the Korean government established a national strategy for securing critical minerals last year. And the government is now trying to diversify supply bases of the core critical minerals like lithium, nickel, manganese, copper, platinum, and rare earth elements. And Korea is one of the global players in the high-tech industry and a producer of electric vehicles and secondary batteries, but it imports more than 99%, so nearly 100% of critical minerals from abroad. But on the other side, Africa is rich in these critical minerals. So, for example, holding 89% of platinum, and 80% of chrome, 61% of manganese, and 52% of the cobalt in the world revenues. So countries in Eastern and Southern Africa are the main producers of these critical minerals. So cobalt, for example, is produced in Democratic Republic of Congo, Morocco, and Madagascar, and lithium in Zimbabwe, graphite in Madagascar, Mozambique, and Tanzania, and nickel in South Africa, Madagascar, Botswana, and Zimbabwe, and platinum in South Africa and Zimbabwe. And we can see a similar situation in the energy sector as well. So Korea imports 95% of its energy consumption from abroad, while Africa produces 8% of crude oil and 7% of natural gas in the world. So that is why the deepening ties with the continent, with Africa, can help Korea to ensure its supply chains in energy and critical minerals. And during the bilateral summits between Korea and Tanzania held on 2nd June, the day before yesterday, so the two sides signed an MOU on cooperation in critical minerals. And today, I read this article saying that in the summit, they have talked about forming supply chain dialogue, so African countries can be strategic partner for Korea for its economic security to mitigate the risk in supply chain.
Cooperation with resource-rich African nations is gaining more importance amid intensifying global trade protectionism, and deepening ties with the region can be the perfect path towards diversifying Korea's supply chains, especially as the key minerals are direct ingredients of future industries, as you pointed out, like electric vehicles. And during the summit today, Korea and Africa has agreed to form a permanent consultative body to discuss supply chain issues, so things are looking quite bright on that front. Professor Hwang, building various industrial infrastructure and digitalization or digital transformation in Africa is another key item that was discussed. What are your prospects on the benefits as well as the risks of Korea-Africa cooperation in those areas?
Yeah. Korea-Africa cooperation in building industrial infrastructure and digitalization offers substantial benefits, including economic growth, technological advancement, improved connectivity, and sustainable development. That is, building industrial infrastructure such as developing manufacturing hubs and industrial parks can provide employment opportunities and improve the economic landscape of technological advancement in Africa. And enhancing digital infrastructure such as internet and mobile networks can bridge the digital divide and improve connectivity in Africa. This can facilitate access to information, education, and healthcare services, boosting socioeconomic development. In this sense, African nations can benefit from South Korea's advanced technology and expertise in digital infrastructure, such as smart cities, telecommunications, and e-government services. However, risk of Korea-Africa cooperation in industrial infrastructure and digitalization should also be noted in the context of debt problem and financial dependency matter. In fact, as can be seen from the many cases of countries that participated in China's Belt and Road Initiative and fell into that trap, large-scale infrastructure projects often require significant investment, which can lead to increased debt for African nations. And rapid digitalization might also exacerbate existing inequalities. If certain regions or populations are left behind, creating a digital divide so that inclusive policy should be ensured to prioritize equitable access to digital infrastructure. Therefore, effective planning, inclusive policies, and sustainable financing models are essential to maximize the benefit and mitigate the risk of this cooperation, paving the way for mutually beneficial and long-term partnerships.
Well, great benefits often come with risks, and it looks like we'll also need efforts to mitigate possible downside risks like a possible debt trap, as you mentioned as well. Dr. Han, taking a closer look at specific business domains, what areas have more growth potential than others when tapped into the African markets? We hear that automobiles and medical equipment, as well as cosmetics, are some good examples.
Yes, of course, apart from the energy, minerals, and infrastructure, there are many other sectors for which a more Korea-Africa cooperation can be fostered, including manufacturing and consumer goods sectors, as you mentioned. So recently, many African countries are very active in taking actions to boost industrialization by especially developing their manufacturing sectors. So their goal is to move away from this heavy reliance on primary industries and natural resources to more value-added productive system. And this is why we can anticipate a significant upswing in the growth of manufacturing sector in Africa. And one sector of interest is automotive sector, as you mentioned. So automobiles are actually one of the major export products of Korea to Africa. And there are a few African countries that actually produces automobiles. So the biggest car producer is South Africa, and the biggest car exporter is Morocco in Africa. And many other countries like Nigeria, Egypt, Ghana, and Kenya, they are very interested in making efforts to develop their automotive sector in their domestic industry. And for example, South African government, they have built up a long-term plan called South African Automotive Master Plan to increase the volume of car production and also the share of local content so that the country can increase its global share to 1% by 2035. And the government actually provides various incentives to support foreign car makers for their operations in South Africa. And also African countries, they want to work with this global car makers so that they can attract investments to establish manufacturing facilities in their countries. And additionally, healthcare sector and also consumer goods are the areas with which Korea can expand its export to Africa. So as you said, the medical equipment and cosmetics are like rapidly growing market in Africa, with even like projected annual growth of 7% and 8% respectively for the next 10 years. So regarding medical equipment, it's in line with the governments, African governments. They implement national policies aiming at enhancing their underdeveloped healthcare sector. So, and the experience of COVID-19 pandemic has actually underscored the urgent need to expand medical capability within the continent. So there is, following this, the demands for medical devices are increasing and there are more opportunities. And also cosmetics, like Professor Hwang said, the fact that Korean movies and TV series are gaining popularity in Africa, and it's kind of positively affecting the increasing demand for Korean cosmetic products. So considering the growing markets, the Korean companies can expand their exports of medical equipment and cosmetics to Africa.
And as you mentioned, the cultural sector also can't be overlooked. Now, staying with you, Dr. Han, on the sidelines of the Korea-Africa Summit, President Yoon held back-to-back bilateral summits with leaders of key African nations. During talks with Sierra Leone President, he signed a memorandum of understanding on the Trade and Investment Promotion Framework, or TIPF. What is the framework and what are your prospects?
Yeah, so as Korea strives to broaden its economic cooperation with African countries, the key is actually establishing robust and enabling institutions. So TIPF is kind of that institution that provides the proper environment for that. So as it literally indicates, it is designed to strengthen bilateral ties and promote economic cooperation between Korea and its partner countries. But the problem is that due to the rapidly changing global economic environment, the paradigm of trade policy is shifting from the traditional form of trade agreement like FTA, which requires quite complex process of negotiation with binding elements, to a more comprehensive and a flexible form like TIPF with less binding engagement. So these institutions should be capable of addressing imminent challenges such as economic security, supply chain issues, and fostering cooperation that guarantees mutual benefits. So TIPF is this kind of new type of commitment, and the framework takes usually a form of MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, so that it provides flexible and agile platforms for implementation. So it opens the cooperation in a more wide array of sectors, including but not limited to like energy, critical minerals, agriculture, manufacturing, and digital transition, and so on. And until now, the Korean government has signed a TIPF with several African countries like Madagascar, Ethiopia, Angola, and most recently, 2 days ago, or 3 days ago, Sierra Leone. And furthermore, negotiations are currently underway with many other countries. And apparently, during this summit, so for last 2 days, the government have signed a TIPF with 5 more countries already.
And Professor Hwang, just very quickly before we let you go, because we are running short on time, South Korea, with the goal to become a global pivotal state, as you mentioned, that plays a bigger role, has set ways to jointly counter the worsening food crisis and climate change impact on Africa as one of the top agenda items. How can Korea expand its contribution and deepen cooperation with Africa in those fields?
Yes, to effectively expand its contribution and deepen cooperation with Africa in addressing the worsening food crisis and impact of climate change, South Korea can pursue several strategic initiatives. These initiatives should leverage South Korea's strength in technology, innovation, and sustainable practices while fostering collaborative and mutually beneficial partnerships. For instance, South Korea's advanced agricultural technology can bring green revolution into Africa through promoting modern farming techniques such as precision agriculture, drip irrigation, and hydroponics. These techniques can increase crop yield and reduce water usage on the continent. In addition, South Korea can deepen cooperation with Africa through not only establishing joint agricultural research centers focusing on crop resilience, pest management, and climate adapted farming practices, but also developing smart agriculture through deploying digital platforms for farmers to access real-time data on weather, soil, and crop health conditions. Moreover, regarding sustainable energy and climate resilience, South Korea can invest in renewable energy projects such as solar and wind farms. These projects can provide reliable and sustainable energy sources, reducing dependence on fossil fuels.
All right, we'll leave our discussion there. Thank you so much, Professor Hwang and Dr. Han, for sharing your expertise.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of this show. Thank you for watching, and we'll be back with more same time tomorrow. See you then.